Hello Trailblazer and Coder. Today we are going to write some code, so I will go ahead and open my code editor. Again, it loads it over there, don't know why. So I'm going to close my windows and minimize everything except for source. And today I'm going to add a little bit of CSS here. Got a little CSS here that I've made to help us with a modal. We're going to make a modal to add locations. Make it a little bit more user-friendly. We got a lot of fun stuff today. And so what we have here is I have a mode button, which is just a little button that shows in the upper part of the upper corner of the screen and allows you to click to change modes or click to open a modal or something. And I have a modal class to display a modal. This will display the backdrop. You can see it's got an RGBA with that's black with 0.5 alpha. And here's the content for the modal. Just your basic CSS stuff. This is not. I'm not teaching much on CSS here, so not gonna go too deeply into this. You'll be able to find it and everything else in the repo on GitHub. And so the first thing we needed to do, I think, is after adding that CSS. That wonderful CSS. I need to bring in some, I have some SVGs to bring in. Let's go ahead and create it. We have our assets folder actually, and it's empty. So I'm gonna pull this up, and there's our assets, or this is the assets I have from my folder. So I'm just gonna take add. So I have add. I have map data and map view. I don't know if I'm going to be using all of these, but I have to do this, don't I? Alright, I thought I could drag and drop, but I guess I can't. I just have to put this in our assets folder. The cool thing about code, it shows right up in our assets folder. So those are some SVGs I've created, and that we'll use those for some buttons. I'm going to create a map view component here. So in components, we're going to create a map view. Open new file, map view.tsx, because it's a component. I'm going to do function map view, and I'm going to export default map view. This is a habit I've gotten into because of how Redux connects. I like to put the default at the bottom because then you can say connect to whatever you're going to connect to, and then you just pass in map view to the function that connect returns. We're not doing that though, but it's a habit I still have. So I'm going to put the default at the bottom here, and we're going to bring in our map that we made last time. So map equals use map. Bring that in from hooks. There's our map. So we're going to take, I think we're going to be moving most of the stuff from here, this render and this point down, and maybe even the return canvas. All this stuff really, honestly, is going to come out of app, and we are going to move it into map view. And I don't need this twice, and I need to bring in use callback. Oh, no, use callback. And I need to bring in canvas, which is a sibling of this. And then here, I don't need any of these, but I am going to bring in, I'm going to return, let's see, return, and I'm going to return, I'm going to make a div and call it app, like that. And you notice I use class name on this div instead of class. That's something React requires because class is a JavaScript keyword. And so you can't say class, so they want you to say class name instead. And so in here, we're just going to put our map view. And we're not going to pass anything into it because it's already pretty self-sufficient. It has map that it's getting from the context. It's passing the on render and the on pointer down into our canvas. And so honestly, I think this should still work. Shall we try? One of these days, well, one of these days it's not going to work. I need to spin this up. Always forget that. Terminal npm run dev. All right, come on. Give me up, and that works. So all we did was create a map view and place the map view in our app instead of having all of that other stuff in our map. It kind of elevates, kind of pulls all of that stuff out of our app. Again, removing imports from your higher level components is never a bad thing. So I want to put a button in here to add, I'm going to put it right here, button, where this is going to be one of those mode buttons that I showed you in the, so class name equals mode button. And I'm going to say title, you should always have a title on your button, equals add. Okay, that's fine. And inside this, we're going to have an image, and it's going to be sourced assets add.svg. Not sure why that wasn't giving me IntelliSense, but alt, that's what you should always have. You should always have alt text. It's good for accessibility. And then this is going to have a handler. We're going to have an add handler. Handle add. We'll put this in here. We'll just say on click equals handle add. And then here we want to have a bit of state. So this is just going to be, this is a component level state. This is not state that would go up in our context or in our reducer. And so it's going to be using useState. Whenever I have state that's specifically for a component, I'm going to call it add it, where you have state for the component only, I just use useState, and it works perfectly. You don't have to get fancy. Set add edit location. If I haven't really shown you how useState works, this is how it works. I know I've talked about it before, assuming I've showed it to you, but you call useState. And we are going to give it a location. Actually, it's going to be location or null. And we're going to pass in null. But this is not going to be a location. It's going to be what we call a partial location. What partial does to the type is it provides a type where all of these properties become nullable. And it's going to be useful, and we'll explain why it's useful in a bit. Whenever you're passing data into a form and there's a chance that you could possibly have a new location, you don't want to have to provide actual values for your type. So we're going to do partial, and we're passing it in null to start with. But if we add, we are going to set add edit location, and we're going to provide just an empty class. And we can do that because that fits the partial definition. And now what we want to do, we want to create a modal. So in my components, I'm going to create a new folder. We're going to call it common. This is a good place to put things that are just like part of the structure of the application, not necessarily business logic. Business logic in a Minecraft map is a little bit of a kind of a silly idea, but business logic effectively means app logic for app, like in this case showing a map view. That's not going to be common, but what we're going to do now is create a modal, and that is going to be common. So I'm going to do modal.tsx and this little bugger. Okay, so we're going to create function modal, and we are going to export that as default modal. And then we need some props for that. And is open Boolean. And we need to bring in React node. Actually, I'm just going to say, because I've done this elsewhere, I'm just going to say React.React node, just to keep things a little bit the same. So we have children is open. I'm going to default this to true, which seems a little weird, but if you think about it, if the parent component decides not to set is open, I kind of feel like it should just be open, because if the parent doesn't want to show this, it makes sense that they would then set is open to false. That's my thinking anyway. It doesn't really hurt anything, because most of the time when this is used, that value is going to be provided. So we're going to say if not is open, return null. And otherwise, we are just going to say return. We have div class name. This is our modal from the CSS that we saw. Div class name modal content, and that's the modal content from the CSS that we saw. And this is going to be children, which, as I've said, is the stuff within the open element and the close element of the modal component. So now we have that. So yeah, in our app, we're going to basically, so we want to display our modal only if the add edit location is set to something other than null. And so the way we do that is we do add edit location, and we use the and operator. And that's just it's kind of a JavaScript-y kind of a trick. And it's the only way to really do that in React. So it kind of makes sense to explain it. The way this works is that when JavaScript is considering a logical expression like this, whenever it's working around a logical and, it checks this first item. If it's false, then it skips it. It skips the entire expression and goes to the next line. If this is true, then it has to check the second expression, because that's an and. And so if this is true, then it will actually process this second expression, and that's what gets returned out of this entire statement. Now you'll notice that modal's giving us the red squigglies. Well, it's giving us the red squigglies because, remember, let me pull this down again, sorry. We have children, and the children is not optional. So you have to put something in here. You have to put something in the modal. And what we're going to put in the modal is we are going to create a form. We're going to create a modal form. And that is going to be called add edit location. And I'm going to create another folder in our components folder, and I'm going to call it forms. And we're going to create a component in here. And we're going to call it add edit location.tsx. This is going to be a little bit more complicated because we're going to want to add validation and stuff to it. But basically what it's going to be is it's just going to be a form. Let's just get the... Yeah, so we're going to want to create a function, add edit location. And we're going to give it some props. And those props will be type add edit location props equals, and it's going to be location, which is our partial. Remember from our app we had partial location, and this is going to be our partial location, and we want to bring that in from our TS file, and we want to have an on submit, and that's going to be just your void callback. So in here we have location and on submit. Add edit location. props. And we'll go ahead and export default, add, edit, location. And from here, we're going to return a form, basically. So I'm just going to have a form element, form, and we're going to have a name field. So we're going to have a label with name. That's going to, no, not name. There we go. Thank you. I think that was Emmett or something. Input type equals text, name equals name. That will be important later. And value will be location.name, which is going to be in our partial, if it's not set as a string, is going to be undefined. Now, what I will say is that React, when you're binding values to a form, React does not like you to bind undefined values to your input. I'm not sure we're going to be doing anything about that right now, but that's something to think about for the future, is that this being undefined, and then when someone types something, it starts to become a string. React doesn't like that for some reason. And then we're going to have label class name equals inline. I don't know that I have an inline. Oh, this is going to be in the form. Whoops. Oh, no. So it's going to be inside this form. Give it some space. We're going to call this coordinates. And that's going to have, no, stop it. Emmett, darn it. Input type equals text, class name equals medium. I have a feeling I'm going to have to add some more styles, because I'm seeing styles that I have not seen in our name X. I have seen some styles in this that I have not seen in. I like having placeholders here, because then it shows you what it is if there's nothing in it. Value equals location.x. Yeah, let me look here, because there's also an index.css, and I think I have some form goodness that I decided to put in the index, because it's a little bit more global than our app CSS. So I'm going to put that in here. There's our form. And I also apparently I decided to give it a font family here, which is, when we originally looked at this, I didn't realize, I couldn't figure out why I hadn't given it a font family. So I'm just giving it basically your Sago UI, which is common in Windows, Tahoma, Geneva, Verdana, and then if nothing else, sans serif, just so we get rid of the Times New Romany stuff. So I have all that, and I should have, input small, input medium, input right. All this stuff is in here. So when I go back here, that's what all this is. And then so that's that, and I am just going to do that and just change these variables. YZ, and if I'm a little bit crazy, I can do that, because why not? All right. And we need some buttons at the very bottom of our form, and I'm going to do that. One really good thing to do with a form is handle submit and actually have a submit button. The reason that is because one of the things that people always think to handle, like the button click for the submit, but they don't think, oh, what happens if the user hits enter, those things. And the form handles that. So if we just, do things the way the form does them, then we catch all of those little user, UX kind of things. It just makes things a little bit cleaner. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to have a submit button, and we're going to call that save. And then I'm going to handle on submit. So rather than handling a button click, I'm handling the form submit, and we're going to call that handle submit. I'll put that right here. We're actually going to pull in the form event. I think we're going to actually get the data from the form event, which is cool. So we have this. What we're going to do is I'm going to pass in event react.form event of type HTML form element. What that's going to do is, first of all, what a submit does is it tries to post back to its own action, and if it's not given an action, it attempts to post back to the URL of the page that it is on. We don't want that to happen, and so of course the best way to stop an event from doing the default thing that it normally does is event.prevent default. And so let's grab the form. Form equals event.current target, and I believe because I put HTML form element here, that should be well, it's event target and HTML form element, but I don't think that's going to be a problem. Then we want, what we want to do, the way we want to do this is we want to create an object that has all of the form data in it. First, I create a new, this is part of JavaScript now. This is JavaScript itself. It's not React, it's not anything else. So if I do form data, that form data comes from JavaScript, as I said. We pass in the form, and then we can create an object from that, because this kind of thing is not quite an object. No, that's not going to give me anything. It's not quite an object. It's more of an array of data items. But what we can do is we can say object.fromEntries, pass in that form data, and that will give us back an object. Very close, if not exactly close, to our location type. So I'm going to call this const form data, and we are going to have that as an object. Here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to say const new location partial. We're going to keep it partial for now, location, and I'm going to put in, I'm going to spread in the existing location just in case there's other properties on it that this form doesn't cover, and I'm going to pull the name out, form data dot name, and what's going on here? Oh, that's right. This is that's one weird thing about this, is that this is not it's not actually a string. So what I need to do is just use as. I try to avoid using as because it kind of cheats. What? Oh, comma. I try to not use as because it kind of cheats TypeScript's compile time checking. But in this case, I don't really have a choice because, you know, this is a form data entry value. I wonder what I can do with this. I could say to string. That's interesting. But what if this is undefined? I guess it's not undefined. All right, cool. But I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to keep it as string. All right, x parse float form data dot x as string, because it's coming in from a text box, so it's a string, but we want it as a float. Why? It's actually an integer, because none of our coordinates are going to be rational. They're all going to be integers. But yeah, keep it parse float. Why not? Form data dot y as string, and z parse float form data dot z as string. Okay. So we want to add this now to our map. So we need to bring in the map. first of all, map const map equals use map. Bring on our map, and then we can say map.add. But here's the thing: add location doesn't take an actual location, so we kind of want to add that here. So I'm going to go to our model and go to our map, and there's this thing in programming called method overloading. Method overloading means that you have multiple different signatures for the same method, and it changes the way the method behaves based upon those signatures. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change the basic. I'm going to change the basic thing here to params. Is that a keyword? I don't think so. Params, and that's going to be, is it object array or is it any array? I forget. I think it's supposed to be any array, but we're going to try this. And so then I'm going to say if params 0, so if type of param 0 equals number, and type of params 1 equals number, and type of params 2 equals number, and type of params 3 equals string. I need to wrap that in a thing. And this is going to have an or, so I think or is, I think I just can do or, but I'm not sure. I get these, I have to look this up all the time, so I usually just use parentheses 3 or not. Okay, I think that's how that works. But I am just going to wrap this in parens. I think or is precedes and, but I'm not sure. What is wrong here? Yeah, it's an empty block statement. So if this is the case, then I am going to say const x, y, z name equals, let's see, number, and then string or undefined equals params. Is that going to let me do that? Okay, so I'm going to also ask params dot length equals 4. What now? All right, well, I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way. So const x equals params 0 as number, const y equals params 1 as number, const z equals params 2 as number, and const name equals params 3 as string or undefined. And then we can basically bring this into here. I really wish that JavaScript would have its own method overloading, because TypeScript is honestly not in a place to do that. Oh, I also want to do this. Yeah. JavaScript is also not in a place to do this. Yeah, so now I'm going to have another one of these. Again, this is going to be an if-else, which is fine in this case. Or I could just do, you know, return. It's not going to return anything, it's void. If params.length equals 1. This is really annoying, by the way. And params. Okay, and this is where we have to have an is. I think we already created an is location, if I remember correctly. Yeah, we've got our is location. And this is the beauty of these type guards, because you can say and is location. I think this will work. Params 0. And if I do const location equals params 0, it might be getting too complicated with this. Yeah, location is a location. And so then all I have to do is this dot dispatch and type add location, and payload is just location. There we go. And then return. Now, to make this a little bit cleaner in usage, we can add some override declarations to this. So we can say add location, and then we want our old things, so we can do that. Yeah, we should probably do void, like that. Really? All right, does this need to be any? Yeah, that needs to be any. And then add location and location. Location of location. And that's going to be void. And so this is kind of cool, because over here, when you're using your map now has an add location. You have this little 1 of 2 or 2 of 2. And so TypeScript, in the usage of the method, allows you to have that type, because even though the body of the function itself allows any parameters, you can't then just do something like 3, 2, and then new location. It's going to complain about that, because it's going to say no overload, expects 2 arguments. It's just not going to like it. So it's going to force the user to use one of your overloads. Now the issue here is that this is not a location. It's kind of a location, because it kind of has all of the properties of a location, but it's not really a location. If this location comes in with an ID, it will have an ID. So one thing we should do is say ID is location.id. Oh, this the double question marks here is a null coalescence operator, and what that says is if this value is falsy, then use this value. Otherwise, use the original value. And so what we can do here is we can say v4 and bring that in from UUID. This isn't going to stay here. We're going to add something that's going to do that for us, but for now, we're just going to keep that in there. And so what we're going to do now is just basically call map. Well, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask if is location, bring that in from location, and we'll pass a new location. And if that is a location, cool. We will call map and we'll say add location. Pass that right in. Hello, I don't know why I always spell it that way. Oh, come on, seriously? Oh, bugger. Bring this in from location. There we go. And then what from here, again, our submit is optional. So I'm going to use the really horrible, they call it the Elvis Presley operator sometimes, because if you look at it sideways, supposedly it looks a little bit like Elvis Presley with the big poof of hair. I don't know. But apparently it only has one eye. And so we're just going to call that. Now this is not going to pass back the new location. The location is added by the form to our map. And what that allows us to do is it just makes it a little bit cleaner on the usage of this. And so if I go here, I can now say, so then the child of this modal is going to be add, edit, location. And the location will be our add, edit, location. Since it's asking for a partial location, it's okay that this is just an object. It doesn't care. I need to bring this in, by the way. Move that up. And then we also want to have an onSubmit handler. And this isn't really going to do much. And I'll just call it handle submit. In fact, all it's going to do is set add edit location to null. Basically hiding the add edit location. That's the other reason, by the way, that I defaulted. Oh, okay, bring this in. That's the other way, by the way, that I defaulted this to is open to true, because maybe the parent, which is what we want to do, maybe the parent just wants to do things this way. Doesn't even want to render the modal unless this value is available. And that's completely fine. Bring this down again. Okay. And I think this will do it, at least preliminarily. I'm going to try this and see if it works. Okay, oh, there we go. Try that again. Now we have this add button. If I do this, it brings it up. And if I say new, this isn't going to show, but I'm just going to do it anyway. New village, call it, say 100, 100, 100, and save that. And there it is. It's at, I'm assuming that that looks very much like 100, 100, 100. You can see our click no longer works, so we have to add villages this way. And so that works. But what happens if, say, we do, what happens if we say, let's run this, and I do new village, let's do new village again, and we do purple, people, eater. We don't see any villages there, but if I go to our dev tools, come on, what's this? Go away, what's new? Our console doesn't have any errors either, but it didn't add any villages. I guess I don't know why it didn't. Oh, that's right, because it obviously wasn't a location. So if I put this here, and I gotta spin this up again, just hit F5, come on, and I add it, and I do purple people eater, and I click save, and it hits our breakpoint. It's our breakpoint. Now this is going to fail, but it's still going to unsubmit, which is going to hide it. What we need now, we need validation. We need to validate our form, and the best place, in my opinion, to validate a form is within that form. So the place I like to add validation stuff is to the model itself. I like to have it in here, and so I am going to have it here. And I am going to basically create a function, and I'm going to export it, called validate location. And that's going to take a partial location. This way we won't have any like other properties on this that we're not wanting to check, spurious properties on it that we don't want. And this is going to return something. I need a new object here, and so I'm going to put that. So I'm going to need I think this is going to be, yeah, I'm going to make this a model. And so I'm going to create, we're going to have, come on, we're going to have something called a validation response .ts. And we're also going to have something called a validation error. Validation error. TS. And the validation error is just going to be something like export type validation error. And this is just going to have a field name. And that's going to allow us to bring the error message to that specific field. And it's going to be a field name, and it's going to be a string, and it's going to have a message that's going to be a string. And then here we're going to have export type, and this is where the type unioning is just wonderful. Validation response of T payload equals, and now here we can have, I'm just going to do it, I'm going to do it this way because I think I learned how to do this after I made this in the prototype. So is successful equals true. It will have a payload of type T payload. That's basically the return object. Otherwise is successful equals false. Not flace, false. Come on, fingers, work with me. And now it's just going to have, let's just give it error, validation error. Import validation error, yeah. Now, here we are going to, so this will work as our validation response for our validation function in our location. So we'll be able to return a validation response with a payload type of location. Bring that in from validation response model. And okay, so the first thing I want to do is, if this location doesn't have an ID, I just want to give it an ID. Because if it doesn't have an ID, then it just isn't identified. I'm not going to give the user an error message because it doesn't have an ID. So I'm just going to give it an ID. .id equals location.id equals v4. Bring that in from UUID, just like that. Oh, I guess I kind of had it half a function, half of a arrow function. I kind of think this should be a function. I don't need to do any enclosure or anything, so it just needs to be a function. Okay, if type of location.x equals string, location.x equals parse int location.x. So what we're doing here, now come on, spell correctly, please. What we're doing here is, if this is still a string, we want it to be a number. We want it to be an integer, actually, and so we're doing a parse int on this. This is just a kind of a pre-validation cleanup. And we want to do that with y. Change these three y's to a y. And we want to do that with, of course, z. And make these all z's. Z. Okay. Now here, what we want to do here is, if not location.x, if it's undefined, we want to say, we want to return is successful false, error, and then that field name of x and message of x is required. Okay, we want to do the same thing with, I know, don't panic. It's kind of gross looking. I have a solution. Z. And we need to change this to y, and this to y, and this to z, and this to z. I'm actually going to get to this solution here. I think I'm going to go here, and I think I'm going to create a helper function here called as error, function as error, and this is going to take in a field name and as a string, and a message as a string, and this will return a validation response of type unknown. But what we're going to return here is, we're going to return our is successful, false, and our error will be field name and message. And that's what that is. That's all that is. And we're going to export that, and we're going to bring that into here. And so this will become, rather than this hideous thing, this will become as error and this will be X, and X is required. And this doesn't like this because, oops, that's not supposed to be unknown, that's supposed to be never. And it likes that. Hey, Mikey. And we'll do the same thing here and here. Just a lot cleaner to read, right? So we'll do Y and Y, and we'll do Z and Z. Now, what we want to do, now that we've checked that that is there, we're going to check that it's the right type. So if I do if type of location.x does not equal number, or is not a number, nan, location.x, which this parse int up here, this parse int up here will return nan and pass it into x. Unfortunately, I need to put some quotes around that. Unfortunately, oh come on, I need to spell location right too. Unfortunately, nan has the type of number, even though it's not a number. I don't know if that's a failing of JavaScript or if it's just they had to do it that way. I don't know. But if that's the case, then I'm going to say return as error x must be a number, like so. And we're going to do the same diddly-do that we did up here, where we Y and Z or Z if you're so inclined. I could go either way. Now, here is the crazy thing. We've done all this validation, but as far as TypeScript is concerned, this location, not really a location. So if we just went in here and said return location, even though we know it's fine, TypeScript doesn't really know it's fine, and that's what the type guard helps us with. Here's the other weird part about this, is that if for some reason it's not a location, maybe we have a bug in our code and this validation isn't sufficient. What is location? And so what I just do here is I just say as error, return as error, and an empty string implies basically a general error, or at least it will when we do that part, is invalid for an unknown reason. Because technically this is location should succeed. We've done the validation, we've checked everything is square, everything is good. So this should pass. Oh, and this has to be as. We need to have another helper function, because what this will be is successful and payload is location. Oh, that's true. So what this will be is, but I think we should have another helper function. And so I'm going to go ahead and put this into our validation response. I'm just going to have export function as success. And this is going to have a t payload, because it will need to take the payload of payload, t payload, and it will return a validation response of t payload. And that will be basically what we have here. It will be return is payload is successful equals true, and payload. Payload. Come on, spell. Come on, fingers. And so what we would do here is just say as success, and just pass location. That's all we do. Oh, I need to bring it in. Cool. Cool. Now, this isn't going to do much. We have to put it in here. So what we're going to do here is, rather than having this in here, what we're going to do is const validation response equals validate location. And we're going to pass in the new location. And here we need to set up some state because we need to put in the error where it needs to be. So I'm going to create some state up here, probably below the map const. And this is going to be validation errors. And it's going to be set validation errors. And that's going to be use state, and it is going to be of type validation error. Yeah, there's only going to be one validation error at a time. We could set it to return more and check all of the fields and then give a validation error for all of the fields. But for now, we'll just do it this way. And so here, we're going to say if not validation response dot is successful, set validation error to validation response dot error, and then we're going to return. And so what this is going to be used for is now we have to find a way of conveniently putting it next to our deedly do, because what we can do if we really want to is we can just do something like validation error. What did I set this as state as? Yeah, or null, and we'll make that null by default. So and then we'll do that, and div class name equals validation errors, and then we would do validation validation error dot message. And what this would do is if we have a validation error, it would display that validation error. Now the cool thing here is we don't need to do this check, this is location check anymore, because as you know, if this is successful, which it will be successful here, then we can just take this if statement off entirely and pass back validation response dot payload, which is definitely a location because the validation was successful. And then we submit. And so let's try that. Let's see what that does. If we go back here, refresh, I'm going to add our purple, people, eater, click save, X is required. That's interesting. Why did it do that? Okay, so let's go back, let's go to our location validation. Why did it do X is required? Did it not? Location. Oh, apparently that's weird. Huh. So not. Let me try that. So that's weird. So if yeah, so nan is falsy. I did not know that not a number is falsy. Well, that changes things a little bit. So what I want to do is move this up above this, because that's going to be a little bit confusing otherwise. And then I'm going to start that back up. And we'll do purple, people, eater, save. X is what? Save. Oh, that's right. Okay. Yeah, here we're doing the parse float. I don't really want to do that per se. I just want to do this, I think, because I want these to actually be strings when they go into this validation, except I can't because they have to be. All right, cool. So what I want to do then is create Yeah, so I'm actually going to create a type here. This is not in my prototype, so this is a little bit of unexplored territory, but I think it should be fine. Of form object. TS, bear with me. So this is going to be export type form object, and it's going to have an original type, and it's going to say p in key of t, and it's going to be that and string, because most of the things you're dealing with in a form are strings. I mean, that's what a form is effectively, is just that's what you have query strings, right? And query strings are basically just strings. So yeah, I think that'll work. So here I'm going to expect a form object, and this form object here will allow, and then this validation will allow for a form object. Oh, pull it in. Interesting. What if I do something even crazier, like go to partial and just basically do this? Oh, wait. And then our form object will be string or that, which lets us do it. Doesn't give us any errors in anything. So that's cool. So this can be a string or a number. And this, yeah, I think that makes things a lot better. I like that I got to oh, this needs to be Z. And this needs to be Y. I gotta be careful with that. Okay. But I think that change will allow us to run it and add our purple people eater. X must be a number. If I take X out, X is required. If I put 100, Y must be a number. If I take Y out, Y is required. 100. And Z must be a number. If I take eater out, Z is required, and I put 100. Save, and there's our location. So that's cool. That is really cool. I like that form object. It can either be the value of the property you're thinking it should be, or it can be a string, or it can be undefined. Very flexible. Very flexible. I really like that form object. Maybe I should create an npm package. No, but now what I want to do is we have our validation working, but I don't really like, first of all, we don't really have much for a validation error, validation errors class. I'm not sure why that's not in the prototype at this stage, but I kind of want to add that. So I'm going to add that. Oh no, we do. Why is that not showing up as dark red? Interesting. Did I spell it right? Maybe I didn't spell it right. Add. Interesting, interesting, interesting. Oh, okay, cool. So I spelled that wrong. It's not dark hyphen red. This would be an index, by the way. It's not this. It's dark red. It should be dark red. I'm not sure. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's dark red. So it's giving us an actual error. But I don't want this to be here. I would rather it be kind of up with, you know, the coordinates or with the names. You know, I can't really, there's no validation on names, but Yeah, I kind of feel like it should be up there. So what I want to do now is create, I think this is going to be another common component called validation error.tsx. And it's going to be, let's see, function, validation error. Give it some props. Type, validation error props. And this is going to take field name, string, errors, or error, validation error, or null. Oh, we need to bring these in. So I need to field name and error, and then validation error props. Error, come on. Validation error props. There we go. What I want to do is basically if the error, do the null conditional operator for field name does not equal field name, then return null. Don't need to return anything. Just don't need to show anything. Otherwise, we're going to return div class name of validation error. You know what? Let's just go to our add location, and I will just take this and use this in here. And then here we're going to get rid of, because we don't need that because we have the if statement above us. And we'll say error dot message, and we will export default validation error. And we'll say as error, since we have that name collision. So that works. That's a good way to get rid of name collisions. Okay, so here we have our validation error, and so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a validation error, and the field name is name, and the validation error, is that what we're calling it? Or no, error. Error is our validation error. And I need to bring this in, of course, but well, that's no good. I've got a name collision that's kind of across the board here, so I am going to change this to validation errors. I don't know. And then we don't need this anymore. We'll go ahead and go back to calling this a validation error. And then here, get rid of that, and we will call this validation errors. There's only one right now, but maybe someday we'll have more than one. And then here, we will have, kind of keep them down here together, because if they're right next to the thing, they may cause weird wrapping issues. And this is going to be X, Y, and Z. Now, I'm passing this in as a prop. I could somehow push this up into a context. Might make this a little bit cleaner, because then you just have validation error field name equals X. But this is fine. I mean, we know what this is. So I'm just going to leave this as this. And then we also, I think, want to have validation errors for field name equals empty string, and error validation error, and that works. So yeah, basically what this is going to do is it's going to check to see if this validation error matches the field name, and if it does, it's going to display it here. If it does not, then it's not going to display it. And then here it's just going to display the global errors for our thing. So let's see how this works. There might be some styling issues that might need to worry about, but I'm not going to do that on camera. So let's see. Let's do our purple people eater. Click save. X must be a number. Now the weird thing is it seems to be in the same place, but it's really not. It's just it happens to be under the coordinates. Maybe in the future we can move this over so that it's actually under these three, but nah, for now it's fine. Yeah. That, I think, does it. I think that is it. So we relegated all of our map content into this map view. We created an add edit location, and we created a modal to wrap around it in app. So that's right here. So here's our button. And when the button is clicked, we add an empty object to our state. And if that state is present, then we show our modal. And then when it submits, it puts a null into that, and then it hides the modal. And then in this modal, we have validation. We get the form data as an object. We pull that object into a form object, which we created, and that is new for this for this repo. It's going to be brand new, and that is an object that can have, for any of the properties of the given object, it can have a null or undefined value. And yeah, I think that's good. I think we've covered all the bases. I think that's it. Very, very cool. One of the things I love best, they say that if you're going to develop, depending on how important your project is, if you develop something once, it's okay. But if you write code for something twice, it's going to be even better. And if you really want something to be very good, write code for it 3 times, and it will be wonderful, wonderful code. It takes more time to do that, obviously, but I think it's true because I'm writing this app again, and I feel like I'm on top of it more than I was last time when I wrote the prototype, and that's why it's a prototype, right? So yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to do what we always do, and that is git add, git commit, video 4. Let's do the video 4. Git push. No errors this time, please. And we will do, we need to make our other, so we do git switch C, and it's going to be video 4. Git push origin video 4. See, the weird thing about this, I want to mention this. If I did something else like video 5, it gives me an error. If I do anything else but video 4, it gives me an error. So I really don't know why it even asks you for this. Why can't you just do push with a U origin? And it knows this branch is called video 4, so just name it video 4 on the remote repo. But you have to actually type in the same name. You have to make sure it's the same. So you do video 4. And that should be good. And yeah, thanks for joining me on this. Thanks for joining me on this endeavor. I really like having you around.